My name is Jacqueline Blackford. I went to Leintwardine School from 1948. What I loved was we didn't have books to write in. We wrote on slates surrounded by pieces of wood. And at the end of our week, we always used to have the band. And you started off with a triangle and progressed to clappers, castanets, then cymbals. And Miss Hardwick, our teacher, used to play the violin for us, and we all played in tune to the band. Alternate weeks we had raffia, which we made marvellous things with bottle tops. There were waxed tops for our gill of milk bottles, and we used to weave them and make wonderful placemats with them and things like that. I was very happy there.
Ken Dodd, I was in Miss Hardwick's class. I can remember very vividly the classroom, her methods of teaching, with the alphabet all the way around the room, and also the times tables on the wall round the room. The thing I remember most, which for me was always the most fun, were the Christmas parties before we broke up for the Christmas holiday. It was very sparse, believe me. All we had was jelly and blancmange and a few sandwiches, but they were happy times.
Peter Faulkner. I came to school in November 1948. My parents bought a shop in the village, so I moved from Ludlow, where I was born. The infant school, the old schoolroom, Miss Hardwick's room, whatever you call it, that's where I first started my education here. And I remember some of the bigger boys in the school used to come round with a coal bucket to top up the stoves. And around the fire was a metal guard. Obviously, good idea, because the stove, you see it very hot. If any of the girls had an accident, the knickers were rinsed out and they were put on the railings. You used to see them steaming underneath the coal.
I'm Roy Hall. I started school in March 1941. Was with Miss Hardwick, but I can't remember the very beginning. My early recollections are we were taught knitting, we were taught raffia work, we were taught sewing and darning. I remember that. The knitting, we used to take old jumpers in, unpick them at school, wash them out, fold them up into skeins, wash them out. When they were dry, re-knit them up into either socks, scarves or mittens. And then if we took 2 felt hats in, the teacher showed us how to make a pair of slippers out of these 2 felt hats. I remember that. Friday afternoon was always nature walk. We would go out down Payto Lane, come back along by the river, and we got away with half a day without lessons. It usually took us half a day to walk around there. I enjoyed it.
Ken Watkins. I went to Leintwardine School in 1942, I think it was. I too was with Miss Hardwick. Very nice. And as we got on later in school, we used to go on nature walks, which was a very good way of getting out a lot of homework.
Alan Beatson. I went to Miss Hardwick's class when I was 6, when we moved here. She used to whack you across the knuckles with the edge of a ruler, which was very painful.
Miss Hardwick gave me the cane for putting my pencil away when she was reading a story. I was 6.
I had the cane once, I think, and I'd got a whistle. And I can't remember much about it, but all I knew was the whistle wouldn't blow. It just wouldn't blow. And then one day in assembly, in the big room, everyone was there. I had the whistle, I gave it a blow, and it went off. I think Mr. Handley gave me the cane. Do you remember him?
I do. I had more canes off him or not dinners.
Yes.
I had them off Jimmy Howard.
Yeah, I don't think Miss Hardwick gave me the cane, but I vividly remember her washing my mouth out with Lifebuoy toilet soap because I used a bad word. I think maybe I was her favourite for not to get the cane, but she did wash my mouth out with Lifebuoy soap. Took me by the scruff of the neck and marched me off to the sink and washed mouth out.
Do you remember when we used to all have gardening lessons, which actually meant you did Jimmy Howard's garden.
You had to do Mr.
Rural
Howard's garden, that
science.
was the duty.
Yes,
We had half a day of doing the garden.
Yeah.
digging and weeding,
And
and
there was a
now
whole day doing woodwork.
Yes.
and
Mr.
now they
Howard.
won't let you put a spade in that ground because Roman remains. And yet everybody who's been to that school has dug it.
Double dug it too.
Yes.
I can remember when Polly, Mrs. Smith, was the rural science teacher. She had us double digging, and that's a form of dig a trench and then throw it over on the patch and then repeat the process again and again. Regularly in the winter time, when there was frozen conditions, you'd make a slide on the yard there and go sliding down the playground. You were lucky you didn't crash into the railings. I can remember one of the pupils, maybe it was Valerie Faulkner, I'm not sure, but she failed to stop and cut her head on the railings.
February the 8th, 1952, we were having music and movement in the hall. And music and movement involved dancing to the music, in doing your own thing. And suddenly the music stopped, and the radio said, no, the wireless said, we have interrupted all programmes today. The King died in his sleep. And Mrs. Howard went, ah, and walked in through the door, you know, the sliding door. She walked through there into the intermediates and said, the King is dead, and they all stood up, and we were so amazed that they stood up without being told to. Not that the King had died, but they had stood up without being told to. Mrs. Howard said, you've all got to go home because the King is dead. And I remember skipping along with June Price singing, the King is dead. And we got told off and said, you mustn't do that. The King is dead, it's very serious.
We used to come in this very room to have our lunch.
Half a crown a week.
Yes.
This is where we used to come and have our school dinners.
Can you sort of imagine today with the traffic on the road outside, coming down the path from the school, around the corner here, back into this, what was then the village hall or the reading room, to have our meals, our lunchtime meal, which was prepared at the canteen at the top of High Street and brought down in special delivery canisters.
This was the main school, mind, for all of North Herefordshire. Because when you think Kingsland come here to do domestic science, Wigmore, Amesbury, all the other schools from around the villages here come to Leintwardine School to do all their domestic science or woodwork or metalwork.
Yatton and Amesbury, all that.
We spent about an hour a day working around the village anyway.
Well, getting to the classroom, yeah.
None of the teachers were qualified apart from Mr. Howard. I don't mean Mr. Appley, but the ones like Miss Hardwick, Mrs. Howard, were not qualified. But it was just after the war, and they had to take somebody bright who did it.
Who was the chap that come after Howard?
Was it Appley?
Appley.
We've got a picture of him here.
Mr.
He's
Appley.
around one of the girls.
And here with Mr. Howard too.
He wouldn't be allowed to do that now.
No. I didn't like school anyway, for a full stop. All I was more interested in was working on the farm. But I enjoyed the time I was at school, don't get me wrong, but as soon as 3:30 or 3 o'clock I was ready to go. And then I'd be off working with the horses or the tractors. And of course when the tractors were coming in after the war, I tried to learn some of them. I was not about 12, learning men to try and learn them how to drive a tractor. And all they knew, if they wanted to stop the tractor, they always said, whoa, to the horse, and the horse stopped. But when the tractor was going along, I'd shout, whoa, but the tractor kept going.
I liked it in spite of them being strict and whatnot. I loved being at school here. Did you enjoy it?
I was at Leintwardine when it closed in '63, and we went to Wigmore. I enjoyed that because I didn't learn a damn thing here. I did at Wigmore.